Okay, guys, welcome to the Strong Opinion Hibs podcast. This is the second episode in our interview series. Tonight, myself and Charlie were joined by Peter Burt, the brand manager at Hibs. How are you, Peter?
Good, thanks. Yourself?
Yeah, doing good, thanks. Doing really good. Looking forward to this one. There's loads to chat about in terms of your role and things like that, so really excited. It's right up my street in terms of like design and things as well, so I'm really interested to hear from you. So just for those who aren't familiar with yourself, Peter, they'll be really familiar with your work. And we'll jump into that in a little second. But before we start chatting about your work, what we'll do is we'll just get to know you a little bit for our fans and our listeners. So how did your love for football start? Who got you into football, or what was your sort of journey into football like as a youngster?
So basically, I'd always been playing from like a young age, and sort of just fell into the game that way, as a lot of others do. And I played up until maybe I was about sort of 10 or 11, then sort of fell out when we moved up to 11-a-sides and things like that. And then I played a lot of sevens football through my teenage years, and then got back into 11s when I was sort of under 19s, under 18s. So I've always played the game, and then I've always watched it as well. So just always been interested and never really lost that kind of appetite for it.
Yeah, kind of love for the game. So who were some of your footballing idols growing up?
I think, probably my favourite era of football, I'd say, was like the noughties, and I suppose that was the time I was probably most engaged in watching football on the telly. So, things like Match of Day, I was always interested in that, and Champions League games throughout that era, I think back on as being some of the most classic games. And I think players that really stood out to me were the likes of, it sounds like a cop-out answer, but the likes of Ronaldinho were made you kind of fall in love with the game, essentially. They had an element of creativity about them on the pitch that just, I think there have been better players since him, but nobody that did anything in the same way I think he did. I always liked Fernando Torres at Liverpool as well. Liverpool and the English team, and I always just thought he was like fantastic to watch at his peak. And Cristiano Ronaldo as well in his early days at Man United. So I always, players that had a bit of creativity, and I think sort of did the sublime, always really just caught my eye. And I think it's always been great to watch players like that. It's what people want from football. So.
Yeah, definitely. I can still remember when that Torres transfer came through and he went to Chelsea. It must be one of the weirdest things ever when that happened. And for 50 million as well, it seemed like, so much money back then, but nowadays it's nothing.
No, I know. But that was the same as well. That was one of those that was sort of really last minute. And at the end of the day, and you kind of just thought it wouldn't happen. There was a bit of chat of it, but one of those that went through really quickly. So it takes you by surprise. But
I certainly did. So we've got a wee bit of a general feeling for your interest in football and how your sort of love and passion for football started. But what about your love and passion for sort of design and branding and the creativity side of things? How did that all start?
So I'd always been sort of interested in like drawing. I always really liked drawing when I was young. And I would draw like sort of footballers and things like kits and stadiums and all the rest of it. Just whatever I found inspiring, I liked to draw. And it was one of those things that was I liked the attention to detail aspect of it. I liked to take my time with it, and found it almost like therapeutic in a way where you just get involved in doing something that's a bit creative, and you'd sort of pass hours doing it. So that was how I first did anything creative. And then sort of through school and stuff like that, obviously as you get a bit older and you're doing things on the computer and just finding different ways to be a little bit creative, and landed in Photoshop and experimenting and all that sort of way. So that kind of was just a natural development in terms of creativity, and it's always just been something that I've found interesting to do and I've really enjoyed. So it's never felt too hard to get into something new and try and teach yourself something. So I've always kind of done that sort of stuff.
Cool. So just a little bit moving into sort of your role at Hibs then. Your title is the brand manager. What does that sort of entail?
So it's only sort of recently changed to brand manager from creative manager, but essentially I still do a lot of the same stuff in terms of looking after everything from like a design and creative point of view, and just all the sort of touch points that the way that fans interact with the club, essentially. So taken on some of the bigger projects a little bit like, so what does our pop-up shop at the Guile look like, and what do we do graphically with that, and the kits obviously as well, but things like the kiosk branding, developing that out, and making sure that there are bits in there that people sort of relate to, and you want to try and essentially to make the experience for a fan like the best it can be, no matter whether they're in the stadium or if they're engaging on social media or things like that. And we want to approach every sort of project with a bit of a consistent feel. So, you know, that's what I'm there to do, essentially, is to try and make sure that we do that to the best of our ability, sort of overall departments.
Yeah, we've seen that as well in sort of like you're saying, a lot of the fans will be familiar nowadays with the kiosks and the sort of, I think it's the Hungry Hibs and the Goalmouth, like on the food and things like that as well. So that's all you that's came from.
Yeah, so that was actually sort of right just before lockdown started. Actually, last year we were right on the verge of doing that, and in many ways, it sort of lockdown gave me a little bit more time to come up with a few different concepts, and that's the one that we, as a group, eventually landed on. And yeah, like you say, you want to try and develop it out, so including some of the sort of the little things like up the slope and down the slope and things like that, and the terrace. And you want to include these little details, whereas I think if you just went externally for that, they might not always get those sort of little niche details in there. But it's that type of thing that you want to try and include as much as we can.
Yeah, no, I think a lot of those, like you're saying, that keen eye for detail that you've got, I think a lot of that does really shine through, and you can sort of see that there's been a lot of thought and care taken behind it. It doesn't look like it's just sort of like, you know, stock images or stock graphics that you'd see at other grounds. It feels very personal, and I think that's one of the things that's engaging quite a lot of the fans. And I think it's weird, but I think that could probably gain new fans as well. Like I think you maybe seen that through, like, we'll talk about the kits a wee bit later. But like the average kit collector might think, oh wow, like there's a map Edinburgh on that, surely that's really cool. Like maybe that's something they'd want to collect, so it's something they've always got from like maybe to visit in Edinburgh or something like that. But that eye for detail, I think, is really, really good and really bringing a lot of people in. So like you're saying, you're started out with, you know, just drawing football players and drawing stadiums and things like this. How did you get to being at Hibs? So what's your sort of story like going through university? Did you have any other jobs between university and actually working for Hibs?
Yeah, so essentially, excuse me, from having that little bit of creativity sort of throughout school, it was one of those where I always wanted to pursue a creative career, and I actually went into architecture upon leaving school. And the course I studied, I was at the University of Edinburgh, and it was a really, really creative course with a lot of different sort of aspects to it and a lot of flexibility. So I really enjoyed that. And then coming out of that, I went to work in practice and in architects for a couple of years. And it was completely different to what I'd actually imagined it might be. There probably wasn't as much creativity within the role. Obviously your course is quite flexible in terms you can do whatever you like, essentially, and somebody critiques it, and then you get on. You learn that way, essentially. But in practice, there were a lot more sort of ways that you had to work and things like that. You don't get a client coming to you with, you know, tons of money and you being able to just do whatever you like. So I worked in architects for a couple of years, and that was kind of when I only really realised when I started working that I actually had interests elsewhere, because I started to fill my time in sort of the evenings and weekends, spare time, doing things, creating football graphics and all the rest of it, and then sort of just realised that that's actually what I'd really quite like to do. So, you know, from that, I'd kind of built up a bit of a portfolio of stuff, but it was quite between deciding that's what I wanted to do and actually getting the job, there's probably a period of about 2 or 3 years. It's quite a competitive industry to get into, football. So, you know, I had to realising you want to do it wasn't quite enough. You kind of had to, you know, really work hard at learning different things and sort of being at the forefront of, you know, if you get these sort of communities and like Twitter design communities, you've probably seen them, but there's a lot of people out there, and sometimes you look at their work and you think, oh, that's phenomenal. I couldn't do that. But you just need to be willing to kind of not be off put by what you see other people doing, and just try and do what you can to the best of your ability. So I kind of kept doing that and just plugged away, applied for quite a few jobs across the UK at different football clubs, and then ended up getting a job at Hibs, which is 5 minutes from my house, so I didn't have to move anywhere to get into football. So that was ideal, really. It was ideal.
That's good. So what's been some of your favourite projects that you've worked on at Hibs? I think it was yourself that done the 80s themed stuff, and I thought that was really cool when that came out. Is there any personal favourites for yourself?
They were nice graphics to do, actually. When you get anything with a sort of different twist on it, it's always fun, because sometimes, obviously you get the basic stuff week to week, but anything unique that you can kind of put a little spin on is good. I think personally, there's quite a few different projects, and the kits is an obvious one, like you say, we'll come on to them, but them as it's the first time I'd ever been involved in anything like that, and then you see people walking about in it in the street. It's kind of a different feeling to having anything sort of base at the ground, you know what I mean? So that's a source of sort of personal pride, and you see people wearing something that you spend so much time on is nice from that point of view. But in terms of the stadium, I really think that the tunnel was the one that made probably the biggest difference, and that used a lot of the brand elements that I developed. And we worked as a sort of small team at that time. There were a few others involved, and we made the decision to sort of put lights in it and things like that. And I think the first televised game was a derby, and I remember looking at it on the telly and thinking, well, actually, that made such a difference. And it's such a basic thing, really. Obviously a bit of investment there in terms of getting the actual branding up and putting the sort of AstroTurf on the floor. But these little things, just when they all came together, I thought that was a one that I think I look back on and be really proud of that one. But yeah, probably those two stick out, I think, as being the ones that are most impactful for me.
Mm-hmm. I think one of the reasons I liked the 80s stuff was it was just really quirky. And I think you see quite a lot of people who are maybe just do it in their spare time, but do it just as something interesting. Like sometimes you'll see maybe Van Nistelrooy or something in like the modern Man United shirt, and someone's edited it that way. But I think the one when Hibs done it, I thought was really, really cool. But like you're saying, the tunnel and things like that's really, really nice as well. Loads and loads of good graphics going on. So I'll hand you over to Charlie, who's just going to chat a wee bit about this year's kits.
Yeah, so this year's kits are, well, I would say 3 of the best kits we've had in a very, very long time, Peter. So well done on that. So the detail in all 3 shirts are some of the most detailed Hibs stocks I've ever seen. So what made you want to deliver something so special for Hibs this year?
Yeah, I think, first of all, thanks for saying so. I don't tire of hearing it. It's nice to hear people and good feedback about the kits. So thanks for saying so. But yeah, all 3 of them are, I suppose, sort of unique in their approach. But obviously it started as well with the kit deal that we managed to secure with Joma. Really is the foundation of what we've been able to do. I think we've had deals in the past and you get a sort of standard service with them, but really Joma offer us the ability to do something completely bespoke. And I think, when fans always discuss what they would like to see in their ideal kit, it's always an Adidas, a Nike, maybe an Umbro. And that, for obvious reasons, because of, things that they've done in the past and sort of the gravitas that comes with those brands. But in reality, the Joma deal is probably one of the best that we could have at the moment, because they allow us to do something as bespoke as we have done. So in terms of like the home kit, that kit was kind of born out of Ron's idea for the club and the kind of message that he'd instilled into us as staff about where he wants the club to be in a few years' time, and reuniting that sort of pride with the city, and having the brand be one of the most recognisable in the city as well. So it was something that just came about out of the chats that we had, and there were a few different concepts bandied about, but when the map one came out, everybody was like, we'll go with that one because it makes sense. It ties in with the kind of marketing campaign that we've got going on, and it looks good as well. So that was they just landed on that one. It was a bit of an obvious one to go with. In the case of sort of the away one, there wasn't really so much of a theme, nothing you could compare to the home one in terms of a marketing theme, but there's always just the ambition there to create something that looked and felt retro, but at the same time was a completely fresh take on a Hibs kit. And we'd never done anything in terms of like pinstripes before, and it was something that added a little subtle detail, the two different brand colours of green within the stripes, and the ambition there was kind of to create a modern classic. So the way I see it, I'd be hoping that in 20 years' time we still see people saying, "Oh, that kit was one of my favourites," and hopefully still wearing it maybe. So that was the ambition there, and it was kind of Joma were really receptive to that, and they've obviously done a few different throwback or retro kits, or ones with that style, with the V-neck and the cuffs and the sleeves. So they knew from that side of things how they would produce that, and so it just fell into place like that. But I'm really pleased with how that one turned out as well. And then the third kit obviously was again a partnership that Greg McEwen, commercial director, he'd struck up with the Proclaimers earlier in the season, and it's obviously got that charity element to it, but they allowed us to use the lyrics of Sunshine and Leith, so it was just interpreting that in a way that kind of, it could be a little bit more creative with it, a little bit more artistic, because it's a partnership with the Proclaimers, and it's sort of that blend of music and sport coming together, a little bit of culture clash. So it was just trying to explore a way that you could creatively sort of represent those lyrics across the kit and still get that message across. So again, really pleased with how that one turned out as well.
Aye, the three of them are top notch. And was there any inspiration for the goalie tops as well, or were they just like stock ones that Joma had provided, or how did they come about?
Yeah, so the goalie kits are just stock ones that Joma have provided, but the demand for keeper kits, when it comes to sort of paying for that bespoke number, doesn't it's never worth it with a keeper kit, because there's a far smaller number required, even just across like academy teams and everything like that, when you're talking about your order all in, not just from a retail perspective, but there's a far smaller demand, so they tend to be off the shelf. But I know everybody's always quite keen on the keeper kits as well, so like the pink Macron one from last year was a very popular one.
Aye. Yeah. The two goalie kits are fantastic as well, but even like stock kits from Joma, they're still class. Like the black and yellow is a top-notch kit. Not one that you've seen. A lot of Hibs keeper kits have black and yellow together, so pretty nice to see that. So in terms of like when you're designing the kits, who do you work with at the club to design them? Is it just you doing them, or is it a wee team, or how does that work?
So in terms of the actual creative, that's just me, but I work as part of a team of sort of 4 or 5 of us essentially, that it gets run by before it goes back off to Joma. So between myself and Greg, who I mentioned, and the sort of retail side of the operation, we'll kind of discuss 3 or 4 different options and maybe come out with, so for each kit, maybe do 3 or 4 different ideas, and then Ben Kinsella will sit in the call as well, and then it'll get run by Ron. We also involve like the football department as well, so Jack's had his say on the kits, because that's obviously an important part of they're the ones that wear it, and they're the ones that are using the kit day in, day out. So sometimes they bring a different perspective that you might overlook, because you're looking at it purely from a design eye. So and then Scott Allen, he was sat in last year's kit session as well. So I think that's something we would like to probably try and do going forward, is bring a player each year in to give them that bit of experience, and because they obviously playing probably don't get to do anything like that necessarily, so it's good to involve them, get their perspective on it, and hear their point of view as well. So it goes to sort of 4 or 5 people at the club, and then we'll take the concepts that we've come out of those meetings and take them to Joma, and that's where they kind of work with us to finalise a product essentially.
Class. So what was your reaction to the fan response to mainly the home one? I think the home one was the one that got the biggest plaudits. So was that nice to see that something you'd worked on had not just Hibs fans? I've spoke to a few fans of other clubs down south and abroad who are like, that is one of the best home tops I've ever seen. So what was that like for yourself here and that positive reaction to the kit?
Yeah, it's great, to be honest. And like you say, it wasn't just Hibs fan. I'm sure I actually saw a Rangers fan in the Twitter replies giving a bit of credit, and I thought, well,
that's when you know you're
can't have done well. I know, can't have done a bad job in that case. So it's one of those where I think you can never anticipate how that's going to go, and I think you spend so long looking at your own designs that you kind of like, you almost start to doubt yourself. On the eve of a kit launch, you're thinking this could go either way, and kit design in any capacity is so subjective. But when you're working on something that is as important to people as the club's kit, that you're aware of that, so you're totally aware that you've got to try and do as good a job as you can, and you never know how it's going to be received. But I was blown away by the reaction to all three of them, to be honest. I think in the time I've been at the club, I don't think we've ever had this sort of unanimous agreement on three kits. So it was great to hear it, and I'm just glad that they all went so well.
For my money, I think the home one's probably the best one we've had since the early 90s when we had the Adidas. So it's probably one that, like the cup final one in 2016, I think years to come that'll be going for a pretty penny, because it's the map Edinburgh, and kit collectors all over will probably be wanting it as well. So great kit. And you touched on it briefly about Joma, but what was it like to work with Joma? Obviously this is the first year of hopefully a long partnership with them, so what have they been like so far?
They've been great, to be honest. I think the very foundation of their deal, allowing us to do what we have done, is a great starting point. And I think the only probably stumbling blocks that we maybe hit were purely down to sort of the pandemic, essentially, because when we started that relationship, we couldn't sort of get over in person. I think it's always difficult when you're starting up a new relationship with, in any capacity, if you're trying to do it remotely. So I think it's one of the cases where we would have benefited from this, like being over there at that time. But we were fortunate enough to visit this summer, and it was, honestly, it's just the place that they've got over there is fantastic. And I think their ambition as a brand, they've obviously been around quite a while, but at the same time come on very far in a short space of time. And you do get a totally different perception of them when you actually see what they want to do and how they want to achieve that. And personally, they're fantastic with their ideas. They're really open to doing something creative, which obviously I mentioned before. I think if you're with different manufacturers, you probably don't get that flexibility or attitude. So they're wanting to do different things with the clubs that they have, and I think that only benefits us. So they've been really good to work with.
I think you see that in, there's maybe 6 or 7 teams that I've noticed are with Joma, but they've all got separate kits, which I really like about Joma, that it's not just everyone gets the same kit. I think a few years ago, everyone who had Nike had the same away kit, the purple and green one. So it's really nice to see that, if you look at a Norwich kit, it's different to if you look at a Hibs kit. Same with Villarreal and other teams that are with Joma. It's just fantastic. And, I can't wait to see what next year's kits look like for us and the rest of them. So touching more on personally, a lot of, like me and Calvin were chatting, a lot of artists and designers, like when they look at their own work, they're not very happy with it. So now seeing your stuff like worn at matches and worn in the street, is there anything about the 3 kits that you would have done differently, or are you happy, like over the moon with how they've come out? Or
I think overall delighted with the way they've actually come out. I think you're always, as I said before, when you look at something for so long, you always have doubts of your own work because you're just so close to it that you kind of you're just not approaching it from the same way as you maybe did at the beginning. So they're probably pulled together over the course of, I would say, around 2 months. So you get a decent amount of time, but at the same time, sometimes the deadline can be quite short in terms of getting things signed off or moving through that process from your initial idea to the point where it actually needs to be signed off can be quite quick when you've got everything else going on as well, the other jobs at the club. So sometimes you maybe don't get as long on the design as you'd maybe like. So I wouldn't say there's anything that I would change. There were a couple of, probably looking at it, I maybe just would have liked more time on some aspects, but that doesn't mean I would change anything, because sometimes more time, you just end up playing about with things. It's almost playing about time more than changes you would make to a final design. So I don't think, looking at the way they've gone down, I don't think I could be complaining at all. I think anything that I would be picking out would be just me being overly critical, just because it's my work. So yeah, I don't think there's anything necessarily I would change about them.
No, that's great. And I'll pass you back to Calvin for the last wee bit.
I was just going to bring you back quickly to talking about when the fans' reaction to the kits this year. And we were talking about, obviously, they say, seeing a couple of Rangers fans and other people from other teams, you were saying, voted it as one of the favourites. There's quite a few videos online I noticed at the start of the season that were doing the rounds, and it was people taking all the SPL kits and rating them like 1 to 12, like the best. And I think just about everyone I watched, the Hibs home kit came first, and the away kit was a very, very close second. And like people would do like away kit ones. Did you see any of those videos or anything like that, or did anyone pass it on to you or something?
I did see a few TikToks.
Right.
Yeah, I admittedly I do spend, because I know TikTok occasionally. You go on that app and you come off like 4 hours later.
Yeah.
So I did see a few videos of people rating the kits, and I can't pass one by because I'm always a bit like, I need to see where somebody puts it. But thankfully a lot of them appeared near the top. So
no, definitely. So just some questions to finish up with. Would you ever be interested in taking any submissions from fans, like some fan design kits?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, well, from my point of view, I'm just a fan myself, essentially, in the way I've designed kits from when I was younger. So it's that's just my point of view, my creativity. So there'll be countless other people out there that have ideas that would be worth considering. And I think I always like to try and pay attention to people's feedback, because although, like I said earlier on, you can't please everybody, it's still important to maybe try and, where you can, learn from what other people are saying, essentially. So if people say they like this part, or somebody doesn't like that aspect of it, then maybe next time you come around to it, you think it slightly differently. So fan ideas are no different. I think there's a lot of design communities online where people create mock-ups and things like that, and some of the ideas are just like fantastic. And unfortunately, when you come around to the actual practicalities of shirt manufacture, some things are out of the question, but you do get some really great concepts, and so they're always worth having a look at.
Are you a shirt collector yourself growing up? Did you collect many football shirts that you thought looked nice in terms of the design?
I would say no, but I think my girlfriend would beg to differ. She collect a few shirts. But no, I've kept a lot of shirts from sort of when I was younger and things like that. Like I tend to hang on to them these days. Like you probably noticed as well, just in the last few years, the sort of like the shirt market's just gone ridiculous for anything that's more than 10 years old. So I tend to hang on to them these days, because you never know, years down the line, that might be worth a bit. Or in fact, sometimes I just wouldn't even want to chuck them out myself. So I do tend to keep them, and I've got a few different sort of European ones and things like that. Real Madrid ones that are maybe from like sort of the early 2000s and stuff like that I've kept, probably far too small for me. But I like to hang on to them just for that sort of collector aspect of it. And I don't necessarily go on these days and like buy any of the retro ones, because they go for a ridiculous amount of money. But if I'm picking up a shirt here or there every season, then I tend not to throw them out.
Did you have a particular favourite growing up?
I always liked Boca Juniors, just in terms of just as a club, and their sort of brand and their kits were always so strong, and I think almost romantic in the way when you look at some of the players that they've had in terms of like Diego Maradona and the passion of their fans over there. So I saw one actually come up on Twitter the other day, which was, I think, their 1998 away one, which is white with a sort of thin horizontal stripes in the blue and yellow, and I think it's a Nike kit and it just looks amazing. I thought if I could ever get my hands on one of those, and that would be one I'd like. But I always like their kits, and a lot of the South American kits just got quite a lot of character about them, so they were always nice. But in terms of my own kits I had, I think I had a Liverpool third kit in 2009-10, the white one with long sleeves, and I had Champions League patches on that. There's something about that kit that when you were wearing it, you just thought, I don't know, it was a good fit and everything like that. So, you know, when everything falls into place, I just thought that felt like a really good kit to be in back then in the day. So that was one of my favourites, my personal favourites that I had growing up.
And out of the three that you've designed this year for Hibs, obviously the home, the away and the third kit, do you have a personal favourite, or does it sort of chop and change?
It does chop and change, but I like the away one. I think it just pips the other two for me, but not much in them at all. But I quite like the away one. I just think there's something quite classy about it, and especially when they wear it all white. The all white. Yeah, I don't know. I think the players themselves as well in jackets said that they really like wearing the all white and they feel good in it. And I think there's probably a bit of psychology there in terms of you step out into the park and something you like wearing, then it must make a bit of a difference. But I like that, the away one from that point of view.
Okay, so just the last question. How do you think you're going to outdo yourself next year then? Do you think you've set yourself a big task to try and... I mean, how do you build on this? Because you've had such a successful set of strips this year.
I know, maybe I should just pack it in. It's time.
That's it.
No, I think that's I suppose the nice part of it is that when things go well, you think, well, that's the next challenge essentially, is how do you better that? And I think, you know, from a creative point of view, that's where you always want to be striving to, is look at, you know, if you wouldn't want to be coming in on the back of a bad job this year and trying to do something. It's always probably better to move from a position of strength. So I think I just have to get creative, but that's going to be the challenge. So I look forward to it.
Oh, perfect. I'll just squeeze out one last question. I thought of see for the production in terms of when you start designing the kits for next season. What time is that started? Are you working on the next year's kits now? I take it, or been a couple months time or...
Yeah, so it has varied in the past, but it usually starts about this time, so it's very, very early on. There's not a whole lot of time between kits. You've just launched one and then all of a sudden you're into another one, so the process has started. It is underway, so that's my current challenge.
Perfect. But thanks very much for joining us tonight, Peter. I really enjoyed the conversation and I appreciate you taking the time just to give our listeners a lot more of an insight to the role that you do. And I think it's good that we can, you know, sort of put your name out there if we can help you at all. Because, like I said, everybody will know your work, and, you know, everybody that goes to the Hibs matches will be wearing it. But it's really nice to know sort of the face behind it. So hopefully with our listeners listening, is there anywhere that they can follow you online that they can see other aspects of your work?
Yeah, so I'm on Twitter. It's just my name with an underscore in the middle, Peter_Burt. And that's basically, to be honest, from a professional view, that's where most of my design stuff would go. And LinkedIn. I tend not to use Instagram as much. So, but yeah, and thanks very much for having me on. It's been really nice to talk about it. I think, you know, when you go through that sort of period of launching the kits and everything happens so quickly, and then you move on to the start of the season and things like that, it's you see the comments, but you don't always get the opportunity to necessarily talk about it and you know, describe the thought process. So I really do appreciate you having me on to do that.
No, that's not a problem. Yeah, just the only thing is you've cost us a lot of money this year. That's the only thing. So hopefully next year's one's only that great. Hopefully next year's one's only that great, so we'll not be in pocket for all three. But no, I think these are definitely ones I'll be picking up all three this year. That's for sure. But no, perfect. Thanks very much for coming on, Peter. Thanks for your time.